So, today we are joined by Ryan Michler. He's a renowned American author and speaker and the founder of Order of Man, which is a movement dedicated to helping men become stronger and more capable leaders. With his extensive background in leadership and personal development, Ryan's work has resonated deeply with men seeking to reclaim their masculinity in today's rapidly changing world. So Ryan's the author of the influential book Sovereignty and his second book, The Masculinity Manifesto. And these books explore the concept of masculinity and the importance of living with purpose. Also, how men can take control of their lives to become the best version of themselves. He discusses the big challenges that modern men face and the decline of traditional masculine traits. It offers practical advice on how to navigate some of these issues. So today we're going to be doing a bit of a deep dive into some topics that are critical for men, and we'll be including physical and mental well-being and also reclaiming that masculinity and how to live a life with purpose and strength. So Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really great to have you on. But let me just start with a question. So how does it feel to be the guy that everyone comes to talk to about masculinity? Is this where you saw your life going?
It's not where I saw my life going, but I think that's a misrepresentation of me. I don't think I'm the person everybody turns to. Maybe some people do, and I do try to be honest and sincere about my own shortcomings and deficiencies, so I certainly don't have this all figured out. It's just a path that I chose to walk about 10 years ago, and it's a path that, at this point, hundreds of millions of men across the planet have tuned into, listened to, been influenced by. So I'm honored to be a part of the movement and humbled that people get advice from us and what we're doing. But I'm not I think your introduction, although I loved it, really propped me up in a way that maybe I'm not always deserving of.
Well, let's hear a bit about your story then. So I believe you're a military veteran. Is that correct? Do you feel like that's had much of an impact on the route that you've taken in your leadership of men?
Yeah, I think so. I grew up pretty much without a father figure in my life. I had my dad in my life when I was young, and I had a couple of stepfathers come into my life as I was a young boy, but nothing that was a real great example of what it meant to be a man. And a lot of my early formative years as a young man were forged on the baseball field or the football field. And then, of course, when I was 17, I joined the military, and that obviously shaped a lot of that. I spent about a year and a half deployed, 1 year in Iraq, and 6 months stateside gearing up for our deployment in 2005 and 2006. And when you're faced with real world consequences of your actions or inactions, I think that turns you into a mature human being pretty quickly. So a lot of my young formative years as a young man were formed through the military and through my time in sports.
And so sort of getting you to that stage, I guess, where you came back, maybe came outside of the military, what was it really that just started making you recognize that there was this need, that there was a bit of a void? What was it that just really drove your interest in this area?
I went through a separation fairly early into my previous marriage, and I realized pretty quickly as I started talking with guys in my community, neighbors, friends, things like that, about my own personal struggles, that most men were dealing with their own struggles, whether it was their relationship or substance abuse or a lack of purpose, lack of accountability, lack of band of brothers. These are things that we hear all the time. And I realized pretty quickly, well, I'm feeling like this, and so is everybody else I'm talking to, but nobody's talking about it publicly. And at the time, I was running a fairly successful financial planning firm. I opened up a registered investment advisory firm, and I'd been doing that for about 9 years. And long story short, I got into the world of podcasting to market my financial planning services. And I realized I really, really enjoyed the medium of podcasting, but I didn't want to continue to have that conversation that I'd been having for about 8-9 years at that point. And I decided in 2015, March of 2015, so almost just about 10 years now ago, that I would continue to podcast, but I would talk about issues that are important to me as a man: brotherhood, being a better husband, being a better leader in my community, running a business, and all the struggles that men face. I would talk about it in a way that didn't put me as the expert, but somebody who's willing to explore it, and we would do it together. And when I started that podcast in March of 2015, I think that, if I remember correctly, it's been 10 years, it's been a decade now, but the episode that I first launched had more downloads than the entire 20 previous episodes that I had done before. So I realized very, very quickly, this is something that men want. This is something that men need. And we've grown it into what it is at this point. So it's been a really interesting ride, but it's been fulfilling for me too.
Absolutely. It really sounds like, and you can tell from podcasts and your writings as well, that, say you're living as a student within it. And I guess that that's going to continue the learning process for you. Because I guess if you feel like you've learned it all, then you're kind of closing doors to learning there. What do you think it is that is happening, I guess, in our society? And I speak about this from a global point of view, I guess, that's impacting and driving this thirst for this information that maybe wasn't here a few decades ago. Or maybe it was. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think the information that we have now was as readily available as it is now 20 years ago. I think there's a lot. I think there's a general demonization of men. This started to happen probably... Well, it happened in the 60s when you have the first wave of feminism. And I'm not suggesting that all of the feminist movement is a bad thing by any means, but this is the introduction to pitting men and women against each other.
Yeah.
And I think when that happens, we tend to begin to look at it as a zero-sum game, that if I win, that the women in my life can't, or the women in my life win, then I can't. And I don't feel that way, and I don't think most people feel that way. But culturally, that's when it started to happen. And then you continue to move into these different stages and different forms of feminism, into third and fourth wave feminism at this point. And it's become apparent that it's no longer about equal access to rights and equal treatment and equal pay and these sorts of things. It's more as, hey, we don't need no man. We can do everything men can do, but better. That whole attitude. And so it's been adopted by academia, by the medical community, by governments. And when these are the messages that are being preached, you have millions of men across the planet growing up believing that they're inherently bad, that being strong or competitive or even physically aggressive at times is inherently bad. And it's not. So we have this whole generations at this point of men being told to sit down, to shut up, to color within the lines, to do what you're told, act more like women. If you have a problem, you need to behave like women in order to address those problems. So it's no wonder that men are not only confused, but at this point, they're frustrated because they know, even subconsciously, that they're feeling different things. They're experiencing different things. They have responses to things, generally speaking, that are different than our lovely female counterparts, but they're being told not to step into those roles in constructive ways. And that's confusing and frustrating for men.
I think I don't quite understand where the feminist movement, I don't know that even using that term anymore is particularly helpful, because actually this isn't about so much, it's got to a stage where it's no longer so much about, women's right to vote and drive and all of these things. I think it's kind of, like you say, where we're in an atmosphere where actually men and women are being pitted against each other. And actually I'll often see things, comments where it's as if, well, if the guys are getting a chance at it, then why aren't the women? And actually it's recognizing the differences, that actually men and women are different. They have different attributes and different things to bring to the table, and that's okay. And I think, like you say, it has become a confusing time in life, and certainly even within the military. I think I was listening to one of your podcasts where you were talking about actually it matters when, safety and operational safety point of view, actually if the slowest person who may or may not, or the slowest or physically weakest person who may or may not happen to be a female, that's a problem. And we actually, rather than being politically correct, need to look that in the eye. And I think those conversations, people are almost, they feel quite bound, muted by, they can't talk about it, they can't get these things out on the table for the fear of not being politically correct enough. So I see where you're going with that, and I think in some ways the anger against some of the feminist movement has become not very constructive anymore. It's not a conversation, but often shouting at an open door. I see some of these forums that some of these issues are getting raised, and people shouting at open doors. So that's really, really, really challenging. We were really generous with your openness about some of your coping strategies, and I think you spoke about there was a period of time where you were drinking more than you felt comfortable with. What brought you to that time in your life, and how did you get out of that time in your life as well?
Well, it's not a pretty story. What ended up happening is the business and the movement was growing so well, and I was becoming overwhelmed and easily agitated. And I thought, just have a drink on the weekend and allow yourself to unwind a little bit. And that was really good. I could unwind and I can unplug to some degree from what was going on in the business and the demands for my time and attention. And over time, the 1 or 2 drinks on the weekend turned into, let's have one on a Tuesday and then a Wednesday night and then a Thursday night. And then it became, well, let's do a little day drinking. And I actually at that point started to convince myself that I was a better podcaster if I was loose, if I had had a drink and I was more casual and loose and enjoyable. So I playing mental gymnastics to convince myself that I was better if I was drunk. And it got to a point where I would run down to the convenience store. I'd grab a half a pint of whiskey in the morning at 7 a.m. Wow. I'd sit in my driveway, drink that, go in, try to pretend to be a decent father and husband. I would do my work. And I think that was part of the trap, is that I was very high functioning at that time. The business was doing well. I thought the relationship was doing well. I knew there were some fractures and some things that needed to be addressed, but it didn't seem catastrophic. And then one day my ex-wife came to me and said something. And I can't remember exactly what she said. I had already been drinking that morning. We were on our way to church. I'd already been drinking. And it stopped me in my tracks, because whatever she said in that moment, I asked her, I said, wait a second, are you saying you want a divorce? And she said, yes. And so I sobered up real quickly. I said that. I've got 4 kids and we were married for 18 years. So to think that she would throw in the towel at that moment was pretty catastrophic and scary for me. So stopped drinking. I started going to meetings, AA meetings. A couple of days later, found one in my area, started to work with a therapist online about working through some of my issues and desire to unplug and detach from real life. And I spent 6 months trying to make sure that I could do everything I could to rebuild and fix the marriage. But unfortunately, at that time for her, it was too little too late. And we ended up going through a divorce several years ago. So it's a lot of pain. It's a little bit further down the road now, so I don't remember it as vividly as I know I was experiencing at the time. But that was the darkest time of my life. It was very painful. And I had to hit rock bottom before I started to make some of those changes in my life.
Now, actually, I see on your website, you actually discuss about that process of going through the divorce and almost of the healing and rebuilding process afterwards as well. Is that right? Is that something that you find that guys often want to talk about?
Well, I remember when I started talking about the breakdown of the marriage and talking about the alcohol abuse, and I was very nervous and scared to do that, because for me, it didn't have just the consequences of losing my family, which was paramount, of course, and that was the priority, but it also had the potential to undermine my business and for me to be out of work. So not only was I staring down the barrel of not having my family, I was also staring down the barrel of not having a career. So I was very nervous about coming clean with a lot of this information, but I realized I needed to do it. I couldn't hide the fact. And of course, I got a lot of criticism, and my business and the movement took a big hit. That was my fault and my responsibility. But I was also amazed how many men just came out of the woodworks and said, oh my gosh, I'm sorry you're dealing with that. I understand where you're coming from. I'm dealing with the exact same thing. Thousands and thousands of emails and messages similar to that. And what I realized is that although if I could do it over again differently, I would. I also realized that through our own struggles and our own hardships, if we're willing to acknowledge them and learn from them and share, then it can be a powerful catalyst for change, not only in our lives, but the lives of other people who are impacted by the same poor behaviors or the same poor decision-making process. And I made the decision to be completely honest and humble about it. And it has quite literally shifted the trajectory and culture of the organization in a powerful way. And that's one of empathy that I just didn't have I was very judgmental. I was very harsh, very black and white thinking. And I'm still that way in a lot of ways. And sometimes my nature gets the better of me, but there's a level of empathy and understanding and room for what guys are dealing with, because I get it in a way I didn't before.
Yeah. And I think that level of authenticity and that level of sharing that you've done on so many different platforms must have been invaluable to so many different people, because actually, certainly when relationships break down, particularly where there are kids and family involved, that's a really tough time. But for you to have that transparency actually about one of the driving forces and the fact that you are using alcohol in that way as well must have probably helped and touched a lot of people's lives, particularly watching your forward journey, getting through that. What was your process? What were you using for tools? Obviously, you mentioned AA and you're having some online therapy and things. What was there, like a day, or were there lots of stop starts? How did you get through that, Ryan?
There were stops and starts. I never, so I can't say that I've been sober for that entire time. You'd have had slips, but it was never any catastrophic where it was just binging or falling into this downward spiral of abuse. But yeah, I mean, those times happened. And for me, I think that in a way it was hard, but it was also easy because for 6 months, the decision to drink was catastrophic. I would lose my family if I did. And I ended up in a lot of ways diminishing the time that I have with my children and, of course, my ex-wife in the process. So at the end of it, I, in a way, lost my family anyways, but I didn't believe that I was going to as I was going through this process. I thought that if I could get sober and if I could get right in my mind and I could do what I needed to do, then I could salvage the marriage. And when we're faced with catastrophic consequences of our choices, it becomes easier to make better decisions regarding substance abuse or even doing the right things. So that was a big part of it. And a lot of guys have asked me, do you feel like it needs to be catastrophic for a man to change? Catastrophic is subjective. What's catastrophic for you could be completely different than it is for me. And I think that should give somebody hope, because what that means is that you get to decide at what point you stop. When have you had enough? You have to decide that. It could be that you have a medical scare or a breakdown in your relationship, or who knows, maybe you get into a car accident and you injure or, heaven forbid, kill somebody, and that's your rock bottom. Or you could just decide today, hey, I'm not happy with my life. My relationship is in turmoil. I'm not as successful in my career as I'd like to be. I don't feel good ever. I'm lazy, I'm tired, I'm drained, my health isn't good, my testosterone rates are plummeting. You just feel horrible. And you can make that decision to say, enough is enough. So AA is a big thing. Therapy was a big thing for me. Being honest with the people in my life, and not just my family, but also with friends that I've never really quite opened up to until that point. I've forged some lifelong friendships through that decision-making process. And then also just finding new and healthy outlets to vent and release as I need to.
And so when you told your friends, presumably your business is going well, everything's actually probably looking pretty good from the outside. When you told your friends, were people surprised, or was there understanding, or were they confused?
All of my friends were understanding. They were all very gracious in how they approached it. Some were more upset than others or whatever, but all of them were fairly gracious. I think some of them were very shocked and surprised. I was really good. I was a closet drinker, so I was really good at hiding the abuse. I did actually have a couple of friends who I told, and they said, we know. And I was surprised that they had known and didn't say anything. And I don't think it's their responsibility. Well, I don't put any of the blame of me drinking on them. I'll say it that way. But as a friend, if you see your friend struggling, I think in order to be a friend, you have to be willing to sacrifice the relationship in order to say and do what needs to be said and done to another person. So I wish that would have been different. It wasn't. But if I ever see a friend struggling with substance abuse or any other vice that he may subject himself to, you better believe that I'm saying something. And he might get mad and I might alienate the relationship. So be it.
And that's okay.
If that's what needs to be done for me to bring it to his attention, then that's exactly what I'm going to do, because I do wish those couple of people would have said something to me. I understand how difficult that conversation would have been. And so I can see that and have a level of grace and empathy towards their lack of approaching me with it, but also I wish they would have. But again, I'm very careful of saying that because I never want it to come across as, well, if only they did, then I wouldn't. Yeah. That's not what I believe. I was making my decisions.
But so it sounds like
it's not on them.
It sounds like it would shape your response now. So if you felt like a friend had, like you mentioned before, if you felt that a friend had a substance misuse issue. So you touched then briefly actually on the impact that obviously alcohol can have on testosterone levels. And obviously that's one of the big things. There's a whole bunch of lifestyle bits and pieces that I encourage patients to see if they can address before, if we do find they have low testosterone. Weight management sometimes can be helpful, but also depending on the level and the cause of the testosterone deficiency, obviously alcohol is a really big downward drive, has a really big downward drive on testosterone levels, and obviously poor sleep and exercise, and there's a whole load of different things. do you see, is this a conversation that comes up much with the guys that you're talking to through the Order of Man, or is this something that people are interested in?
Are you referring to alcohol abuse or
Testosterone deficiency?
testosterone rates?
Yeah, decreasing testosterone rate.
Oh,
Yeah.
Of course. You don't have the studies in front of me, but we it's very clear, and you'd have all the information to support this, that generally speaking, our testosterone levels are drastically reduced compared to that of our grandfathers, for example. And so alcohol abuse is, if I say anything and I'm wrong, because you're the expert, please correct me. But alcohol abuse, obviously, being overweight, obviously, is an issue. Not working out is obviously an issue. When you're drinking, you're consuming horrible calories instead of nutrient rich and dense calories that stimulate and help testosterone production. Of course, your sleep is just drastically altered, and we know that getting the proper sleep and rest helps boost testosterone levels. So there's a lot of factors, like you said, but alcohol seems to hit just about every negative factor that it can with regards to your nutrition, your body fat percentage, your sleep and recovery, your nutrition. And so, of course, it's a huge factor in declining testosterone rates, not to mention the plastics in our environment and what do they call them? Androgen disruptors and all of these medical terms that are above my pay grade.
There's so much going on out there. And I think at the moment we are in our infancy about the knowledge about the androgen disruptors or endocrine disrupting chemicals in our environment. And I think that all of those different influences are those ones that cut there that are outside your control, are the ones that can make you feel a bit hopeless. And certainly I, as a mum to a boy, and regularly wondering about your containers his food's in and the fire retardant chemicals in its environment and stuff, and wondering what impact and things that might have. But I think you've pointed out, actually, there are lots of things that are within our control, and they're not the fun choices a lot of the time, or at least we don't consider them the fun choices right away. Your body composition, your training, being regularly active, getting good sleep habits, which usually involves not drinking because it messes up your sleep, and all of those good things. But all of those things come when you can deliver a sense of discipline. And that's one of the things that guys with testosterone deficiency often really, really lack. And I guess when I came across your materials and everything, this is one of the things that I'm really excited about, because often guys will come to me and they'll be really low, they'll be flat, they'll be lacking in energy. They might have become complete introverts, having been really confident. But as their levels are dropped, they can't decision make, they've got brain fog, marriage is falling apart, work's horrible, and they're in a real state. And the cool thing is, you go, right, you've got testosterone deficiency. We don't necessarily know why. We'll do the things that we can do to reverse the reversible. But if you still have it, we might go ahead and treat them. And then at this point, I always say, look, buddy, I'm giving you a toolbox here. This is your medication that's going to bring you back to normal hormonally. And it's up to you. You can either leave the tools in the box over there and hope that the testosterone does its work, or you can do a whole, today's the beginning of the rest of your life type moment. And I guess these are the guys really that I think could really benefit from, certainly from both your books and from listening into your podcast, Order of Man, because actually it's that finding purpose, which I think you touch on quite a lot, and making sure that you start instilling that sense of discipline and creating new routines and new habits. Where would you suggest these guys start?
Oh, the gym. That's where men need to start. It's always the gym. And I say that there's a lot of ways and places you can start, whether it's through therapy or journaling or reading good material, listening to good podcasts. And you should do all those things. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But for men, I think the best place to start your journey is at the gym. And maybe it's not at the gym, maybe it's running, or maybe it's at jujitsu or whatever. But the point is still the same. And the reason this is so important is because it's a force multiplier for you. When you go to the gym, obviously you're going to start stimulating different hormones within your body. They're going to help you feel better about yourself. That are going to energize you and uplift you. So there's that. You're going to start to notice very quickly, if you're 100 pounds overweight and you go to the gym, you could lose 5 pounds this week like that. And within 3 weeks, you could actually notice a difference in your physique, which helps maintain that discipline to keep going. Another factor of the gym or jujitsu or any of these things is that you're going to be around other men who are getting after it. And we know, with regards especially to testosterone rates, that a man's ability to compete and more specifically win actually stimulates testosterone production. So there's so many different things about being at the gym daily that it's not just a one factor, it's a force multiplier. And then as you feel better about yourself, you develop confidence, you start building friendships, You start looking better, so you feel better naked when you walk by the mirror, which means that you're going to be more likely to maybe engage or initiate sex with your partner or approach women. There's just a whole host of things that happen when you start getting in shape. So that's the best place to start.
Absolutely. And it's interesting as well. The point you raise about getting to the gym is actually, in some ways, depending on your gym, can be creating a bit of a community as well. So some of these guys are going to be pretty isolated to start out with. How do you see the guys? How important do you think community with other guys is for men these days?
Well, it's crucial. And the only reason we even ask questions like that is because it's pretty easy in the ease of modernity to get by without having a band of brothers. But when shit hits the fan, you realize and you look up and you're all alone. Mm-hmm. If your wife comes to you and says, I want a divorce, the first time you might look up and realize, oh boy, I don't have anybody else in my life to help me navigate this. Or if you're faced with a medical condition and nobody's there, or you're just struggling with lack of motivation, lack of purpose, lack of direction, and there's nobody around you that you're inspired and motivated by. So most men, as the saying goes, lead quiet lives of desperation, and they're just doing enough to get by. But I would also suggest that if you don't have men like this in your corner, that you have to take the initiative. I say, for example, if you go to the gym and you just said it, you can create a community, but you can't just show up to the gym and think everybody's going to welcome you with open arms and all of a sudden you're going to have this robust band of brothers. It requires work, which means you have to so when I go to the gym, I don't bring my earbuds ever.
Right.
Because I'm there with people. I don't want to listen to music. I'm there with people. There's an opportunity for me to introduce myself to people, an opportunity for me to ask questions of other men I see who have the physique that I'm after or the discipline I want. And so I'm constantly looking for ways to break the ice with the people that I see every day. I'll see them for months, and it's crazy to me that you could see a person for months and never take the earbuds out of your ears and say hello to the person that you spend an hour with every day for the last 90 days of your life. Open up, share, ask questions, be curious, build your network. It's crucial.
It's interesting though, isn't it? It's even interesting that we're needing to have that conversation. Do you feel like, I don't know, maybe life, technology, the way we're working, the way our communities is out, is meaning that this is now something that people are having to force into an effort and an active thought processes rather than just a habit? Do you feel like there's been a change?
Of course, because 1,000 years ago, if we needed to get food, we would have talked to our neighbor and said, hey, will you give me some corn? And in exchange, I'll go help you hunt and we'll kill that deer together. But we have to do it together or we'll both die. And now if I don't have a friend, I'm not going to die. I don't need anybody to help me build my house or hunt a deer or an animal or teach me how to cook, or I don't even need to know how to change a tire. I can just call AAA and have them come out and take care of it for me. And I'm not saying those things are bad. The ease of modernity is actually really nice. I enjoy being in this climate controlled room right now where it's set at 68 degrees and it feels pretty good always. Mm-hmm. But also when we're not forced with hardship, we have no need to rely on anyone. And the problem with that is that even though your life might be 90% or even more, 95% pretty good, there's always going to be that 5% that comes up. And in that 5%, if you don't have people in your corner, it is catastrophic. It's absolutely devastating. So you have to choose, to your point, choose to build these relationships because you're not really forced to the way we would have been 1,000 or even 500, 200 years ago.
And it's interesting as well, because I guess that also kind of feeds into your narrative about that importance of that sense of purpose, because that sense of purpose, be it whether or not you're going to go kill something or catch something or build something within a team and within a community, I guess, is if everything becomes, your tasks become less physical and more independent, is you working potentially even from home, from your office, you lose all of those connection points and all of that physicality, I guess, alongside it. So
I work at home, so there's nobody here. My dog's laying right here. There's me. I'm not working out. I have a treadmill sometimes I walk on as I'm taking calls, but I'm sitting at a desk. I'm hunched over. Nobody's here. I'm isolated. All my interaction comes from this or being on social media, which can be a complete cesspool at times and also very good